how to transfer to the desktops around for anyone who couldn't make it tonight or is only getting to see parts of it. So we'll start by sharing my screen. Someone could just let me know once they can see my screen. That would be great. Anything, Ash? I can't. What is this? Oh, can't get myself out of the chat. Okay, I'm gonna go to my desktop and I'm hoping that you guys can see my desktop when I get there. Can anyone see that? Just key on your mic for a second.
No, I just see a blue screen.
Just a blue screen. Okay.
And it's buffering.
Loading.
Okay. Anything now?
Not for me.
Okay. Are you on a phone or on a computer?
I'm on a phone.
Okay.
I'm on my iPad. It's just buffering.
It's buffering. Okay.
I'm on a desktop and it's not.
It's not showing. Okay. Let me try something different then. Does anybody see that screen? The screening tool.
No. Nothing.
Okay.
At the top it says loading meeting content. That's
Mine says someone is recording this meeting at the bottom.
Okay. Nothing, nobody, nothing. Okay, let me try. I'm going to try to upload the PowerPoint and see if that will work, because normally all those things would work. Okay, someone let me know when and if they can see a PowerPoint come up on the screen.
It says waiting for presentation to begin.
Okay.
Oh, I see a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Nova's health part of
Yep.
came up.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, well, at least we have the PowerPoint. So
I don't see a PowerPoint.
It didn't pop up on your screen?
It's just like there, but it's like a black screen.
I don't have a PowerPoint either. I'm on an iPad.
Okay. And presenting my desktop didn't work. Just a black screen.
It loaded for me. I think we just have to set it for a second to load.
Okay, leave it for a sec. Okay, so while it's loading on people's screens, what I'll do is I'll just kind of talk through the other parts of it when I won't try to keep switching around because maybe that's what's holding some of it up as well. So for the COVID hub part of things, on all the desktops at the hospital, the COVID hub has been like kind of pushed to the desktop. It's a little blue icon that says below it COVID-19 hub. You can also access it when you go through the new Nova Scotia Health like the Microsoft Edge link to it, and then it says coronavirus updates in the top right hand side. If you click in through there, it takes you in. Then there's a couple little drop down menus of different things you can do. One is I'm working in, and then it's like a drop down. It has emergency, acute care, perioperative services. Or there's another section where it says I'm working in, then I'm caring for, and then that'll have things like the primary assessment center, secondary assessment center. If you go into the perioperative services one from the first drop down menu, there's lots and lots of content on the pages. They were really helpful at first, but I find now they're very bogged down with a lot of stuff. So I find it easier if you are looking for something specific to key in the word in the search bar to look for it, and then over after you type in the words, you can select if you're looking for it from perioperative services point of view, and it'll tell you how many documents are there for that. So for example, the other night I went to look for the new clinical pathway. So what the clinical pathway slash decision tree is, you'll see it around the OR when it updates, which happens to be quite a bit the last little bit with all the changes that have been happening. So that's the one that says if you're from a cluster, you need to be treated as such, or before when we weren't a cluster, if you met this criteria, you had to be treated as airborne or a contact droplet or what have you. So if you go into that page and you just type in pathway in the search engine, and then it'll bring you up, I think it's like 4 or 5 pages worth of results. But if you go over to the right hand side and just click perioperative services, it really narrows it down, and you'll see clinical pathways, decision for anesthetic or decision for surgery. So those are some of the resources you can use on the weekend if an update happens on Friday night and Rebecca or I are not there to print off the newer document to post around. And it's also a really good habit to get into, especially on the weekends and holidays, to take a few minutes to jump on and just to check what the new and updated content is. On that screen, that very first screen where I said there's one section that says I'm working in or I'm caring for, over far right to that, there's a whole tab that says new and updated content this week, and it'll go through, and for all the different areas, it'll list what's new and different. And it's good to see some of the other things, like the airway document, I think it lives under the perioperative one, but it's also in the emerge one. That's what they go by for their protected airway intubations. You'll see any pathways that are available online will also be there. So it's a good thing if you're not familiar with it yet. It really is good because as best as we can keep you updated, there's things that we miss or there's things that we don't get a chance to tell you. As well as if you have a Nova Scotia Health email account, when you log in, they've been sending the coronavirus updates daily now again. And down the bottom of that email, there is, for the past week, they'll list what the newest documents are there as well. And you can click in and view them right from that email. It makes it super easy. The second thing I wanted to talk about in relation to that, which I provided the link in this invite to have, plus if you're in any of the perioperative nurses group or the Cape Breton Regional OR group, I posted it in there as well. And I'm sorry if you can hear that banging. Oliver won't stop scratching. So the link is for the daily self-assessment screening tool that the district put out, I think last week it was, and wants all staff to complete prior to arriving for their shift. It's super easy to do. Once you have the link, you just click in, you put your name in, you put your email address in, and it goes through and asks you all the screening COVID questions, and then you pick your organization. That's the other piece of information it looks for, IWK or Nova Scotia Health, and it'll email you results. So at the end, if you say no to everything, like don't have a new or worsening cough or headache or fevers, chills, all that stuff, you pass and you win the trip to work for the day. But if, for example, one of the questions is, have you been notified by public health that you've been at an exposure site or you're at deemed a high risk site? In the end, it'll say no, do not return to work. So it's a good thing, and it does say that information is shared via the Privacy Act or whatever. So I don't know if there's any way like the managers can go in and like see who's completed it or whatever. But I did get an email. It did take a bit for it to come through. Like I did it the night before last, I think, and I've seen it came through today or something. So it is a little bit delayed, but it does happen. It does come through. Somebody did have an issue with it, like it wasn't accepting their email, and I don't know what happened, but they did end up getting through, and I went in and I tried. I put my Nova Scotia Health email in, it worked fine for me, and then I went back and I put in my just my Hotmail address, and it worked for that as well. So I think it might have just been a little bit of computer glitch or something. But if you're not getting it in, like the email box lit up red that it wasn't accepting the email address, but eventually it did work. So keep trying, or if you get persistent trouble, just let someone know, and we'll try our best to get to the bottom of it. Um, so that's pretty much it for those two things I wanted to go over related to that. I was going to next go over the tabletop exercises. So anyone who came to the sessions back in December, it is the same ones, but the type of patients that we potentially could see haven't changed. There's a few different things that might be different as we go through the PowerPoint. Instead of the last time how we each had a team and we came back and reported to the group, what I thought we could do is we can utilize the chat, or people can key on their mic and we can just kind of talk through the different scenarios together. There's also a few different things when we get to the pregnancy one that I'm going to point out that were kind of conversations from today that evolved a little bit. So yeah. So basically, for anyone who wasn't at the PowerPoints, I'm going to go through it right from the beginning. If you guys can't see my slides advancing, just let me know, but hopefully everyone can see the PowerPoint by now. If not, just maybe throw it in the chat, or you can key on your mic. Jennifer.
Yeah, no, I can't see it, Lauren.
Okay, so I'm going to read off the slides anyway, so it won't be as visually appealing as it will be for others, but I will read everything. Okay, so the first slide just explains what a tabletop exercise is. So a tabletop exercise utilizes a scenario to review and test decision-making processes and existing plans. Participants will review a COVID scenario and discuss actions in response. During this exercise, participants will need to rely on their own resources to manage the incident. Afterwards, participants will discuss their experience and what they have learned and suggest improvements to their emergency planning and preparedness. So from the first wave to today, we've had quite a few positive, presumptive patients pass through. I'm not sure if they even got to the patient. There was one today as well. So we've had this on the back burner a little bit for the last little bit, but it's always kind of been in our mind. So I like to think that everyone is pretty well equipped. It's just kind of asking a few clarifying questions and just to get really thinking about it again. So the overall goal of the exercise is to identify areas and the specific pathways that need improvement to address the COVID-19 scenario that we're talking about. So the objectives are to review preparedness for the arrival of a suspected COVID patient who requires care within perioperative services, to provide an opportunity to discuss and explore COVID pathways using structured scenarios that are loosely based on some real-life events, and to identify strengths of the plans as well as gaps that may need improvement. And really what I hope is to find any gaps that we can improve upon tonight as a team and do better going forward in the care of the patients that we have coming through. So for the process, a patient scenario will be given, not to each team, we'll do it all as a group. Everyone will have, we'll give everyone a few minutes to kind of percolate it. Then we're going to start to report back and just kind of see how we would care for the patient, the resources we would lean on, pathways that we would take, people we would notify. As the patient scenarios differ, then we'll utilize some different pathways and processes for caring for a COVID patient. The pathways aren't available, but if you are able to log on to the hub, there's some there. But I think that you'll be able to pull most of it from your experience over the past 15 months. And then once we have gone through all the scenarios, we'll debrief and discuss them, including any strengths or areas for improvement that we've picked up on. So the first scenario, so we have Jane Doe. She's a 55-year-old woman who arrived to emerge through EHS with complaints of abdominal pain. She has a positive travel history for St. John, New Brunswick. She's febrile currently and has a new cough. A rapid test was performed and she is COVID-19 positive. Surgery was consulted and she's booked for an E1 laparotomy for perforation at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's Friday, December 25th. A surgeon requests the lithotomy position. The OR team has left for the evening, and the supervisor phones them and indicates that the patient is COVID positive. During huddle, it is decided that the patient will require ICU postoperatively. There is a bed, and they will accept direct. The surgery is uneventful, and patient is transferred to ICU post-op. So I'll let you kind of just think about it for a second. And then whenever anybody has an idea, how they would start it, what would be the first thing that they would think of if, starting from the beginning without knowing the ending, where you would start with planning and preparedness for this patient.
PPE.
What was it, Phyllis? Does anyone have any thoughts to it? What kind of?
Gather all the equipment you needed.
Yeah, exactly.
The
So
yellow pins, all the staplers you would need. Meet with everybody on the team, obviously, to huddle first. Discuss what everybody needs. If they need an energy device, if they need blood, if they need yada, yada, yada.
yeah, exactly. And because we're saying this patient is an E1, we likely would expect that they're going to go to sleep before that 21-minute airway time has passed after they're intubated. Amy mentioned in the chat that make sure we have enough staff. So that was one of the points. I forgot to take the note that was on the fridge, but one of the questions was around the number of staff that need to be on call for COVID. And it was kind of discussed in wave one. If this patient was somebody that taking COVID out of the picture, you would have brought in one or two staff members as well. You would factor that in when you include the numbers for PPE buddy system or whatever we want to call it, an extra person to kind of stay clean and watch people don and off, and your runner out in the hallway. So I do think that I think the question on the fridge was, is four enough? I think that for a standard case, that four should be plenty. But again, if this was a truly one patient who did require the blood products, who you're going to need to be running and getting and emptying suctions and all that stuff, you may need to think about that fifth person just because of the acuity of the patient you're caring for. So when you do your huddle and you determine, okay, this patient needs to be put asleep ASAP and for the surgery to start, what's the surgeon gear going to look like from the time the patient enters the room?
They're going to be fully decked out, scrubbed and everything, probably.
So they may or may not be scrubbed. It's going to depend on how many people you have in the room, because with lithotomy position, they can either position maybe before the patient goes to sleep and then they can scrub and be ready to go, or they may have to wait until after the patient is put asleep to position. So that's kind of the thing to think about in these scenarios. If they do need help, if the circulating nurse will need that extra set of hands to help position this patient, that's a factor to consider as well. So if the surgeon had to wait for the patient to go asleep before they could go out and scrub themselves, because we blocked off that doorway to the scrub sink, this is why we did it. If there was that small percentage of time where the surgeon couldn't be ready to go before a patient went to sleep, they would be able to exit out that door, do their scrub, and then come back in and get gown and glove to start the surgery. So and then related to the supervisor calls, indicates COVID positive. So right now, I do believe that the call list, when it goes down, it has the two people who are like planned scheduled call, and then the two alternatives for call back. I noticed that there was a sign on the fridge, so I assume that everybody on evenings, Monday to Friday, is on backup call as a third and fourth. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just assuming that. So that's when, so the supervisor question came up today, and can they confirm or deny or give some more information about the status? That's what I'm just going to talk about. So that came up today and as an ask, and so I took it away and I investigated a little bit, and I sent off an email to their manager and their director, and then that got sent to Kathy Lynn because they were kind of like, "What is she talking about?" So we all had experiences with different supervisors and different abilities, and so it was presented with they when they didn't understand, when the director didn't quite understand the difference in when all patients are, because we're in a community cluster, there's a different kind of decision tree or classification that they fall under outside of our surgical tree. So they're considered orange patients, community cluster. They get swabbed on admission. They don't understand the difference with us, and we need a negative swab with a negative PCR test in 72 hours to consider them free, that they're not COVID positive. So the ask came back that I develop a kind of a idiot proof decision tree for them to kind of follow. So I sent that back to Kathy Lynn just a little bit ago. So we'll see how that works out. But basically, it's for them to look at and say, a patient requires emergent surgery. Okay. Have they had a PCR test in the last 72 hours? Yes, they did. Okay. If it was negative, business as usual. If they did and it was a positive, then they know that they'll need to call out those additional two staff members. And then the other side is no, they haven't had a test in the last 72 hours, so they need to have a PCR test before coming to the OR. And if there's no time, then I included in it that that would also indicate that we need to have additional staff called out. You got called for a section, set up the case, and then, yeah, when you went, you found out that the swab wasn't sent back. Couldn't really wait for results. And I think that's going to happen a bit more because the the lab told me on Tuesday that, a gene expert test or a rapid test no longer is in that 1 hour time frame of turnaround time based on the amount of swabs that they're processing in this lab. And we're not as bad as Halifax, don't get me wrong, because we're only feeding in, to my knowledge, the Grand Lake Road and maybe, I don't know if St. Martha's comes here as well. I think it might. So we're not the volume that Halifax has, but it's still backlogging them a little bit, and it doesn't make it any better. You guys haven't discussed yet, and pack you for calling staff in. That's something maybe you can bring to Rob Cameron and just say, we remember, two swabs are all going to Halifax, Alyssa, because they're a web-based registration system, not the Meditech type system that Grand Lake Road uses. But yeah, for Rob, you can just maybe have the conversation with him to say, maybe we like the OR puts like a sign-up list for those that don't have the nights. Like your 3 to 11 and your 2 4 to 12s Monday to Friday, maybe the 3 to 11 can be asked to be that additional body if needed, and then on the weekends where you would only staff 8 to 4 and 4 to 12, you can put a sign-up sheet for volunteers, and then they also get like a standby pay for doing their part. So yeah, the supervisor thing, we're working on it. We also thought of a different way of maybe approaching the surgeons and making sure that they addressed to the supervisor, whoever they relay the message to get called out, that they need to say, swab is not back, it's going to mean something different for the OR. We're just trying to figure out exactly how we can best get through to the right person or people or group to get that message to you guys when the supervisor calls. So whether it's the surgeon saying when you call the OR, say you need additional staff, or whether it's the supervisor figuring out the difference of, um, we need different type of negative, we need different type of innocent proven than the floors do. But there was the comment came that one of the supervisors has to leave a post-it note on the door to say don't forget the keys when they leave. So it might be a little bit difficult trying to explain our web that we have weaved in our department, and calling in appropriate staff means something different from one patient to the next. So we're working on it. Hopefully by the weekend, I don't know, Kathy Lynn will send that off maybe to Darlene and Kendall tomorrow and get something in place. So hopefully by the weekend it's not going to be an issue anymore, but always kinks to be worked out. So back to our little scenario here. So we have Jane Doe. She's emergent surgery. Surgeons gowned before because they were able to put them in lithotomy, say, before they went to sleep. And then surgery begins. Post-operatively, they're going direct to ICU. So there's no worry about having to be extubated. So the OR team should doff their PPE and re-don clean stuff for patient transfer, and then they will doff upon arrival to ICU. Any questions related to that one? Or any thoughts?
Who's a family liaison?
We don't have a specific family liaison. The ED department, so let's just say they come from there, I think they do have one. So depending on the patient and how and when they come in, via EHS, they're not going to have a loved one with them, especially when they're deemed COVID positive. They're not allowed to have anybody. So that could be something we include and hand off at report to say, the name is on the chart or the number's on the chart. If when the patient gets settled, if that's a phone call that can be made. But otherwise, there's no one specifically dubbed that task to phone any family members. And unfortunately, with COVID positive patients especially, there is no visitors. They do try to support a FaceTime kind of thing when it's applicable, but that's all they can offer at this time. Should we maybe look at having a family liaison for the unit in general, especially since all patients have restricted visitors? Yeah, we can definitely look at that, Charlene. That might be something that we could just call it a unit champion to do that, or we dedicate the scrub nurse or one of the PACU nurses to be that person. We just have to set it in stone and say who it is and let them own that job. We can definitely do that. Yes, and the stop sign. So it is the receiving unit's responsibility to do the stop signs. So we should make that confirmation when we call to give them the heads up that the patient is coming for transfer. So that's something else we didn't touch on, was once the patient is ready to be transferred, we still need to do that same process where we phone ICU and say we're coming over, like they'll have to get their vent ready, all that stuff. And this will be going to the ICU 2 or the former CCU. So yeah, that would be, and we would make that conversation and confirm you guys are going to do the stop signs, right? Or maybe they have no bodies to spare, and we can make that happen as long as the conversation happens and somebody does the stop signs. That's all that matters. ICU should have a runner for the stop signs or for the family liaison, Cameron. For the stop signs, yeah. So they should have someone dedicated for that to be the receiving unit. Any other questions from scenario 1? No, only some of you guys can see it, so that kind of sucks, but I'll move on to the second one, and then if we think of anything else or if the other one generates any other conversation, we'll hop on to it. So the second scenario, so Billy Bob is booked for an E2 appendectomy at 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Nothing else was communicated. The emerge reporter arrives in the holding area and they have droplet contact PPE on. The COVID-19 risk assessment reveals that Billy Bob was at a location identified by a public health agency alert. He has no symptoms and he's currently undergoing a 14-day isolation for the same. You currently have room 8 set up for the case, so similar to the other night where you're in the non-dedicated COVID room. The case proceeds. It's uneventful. And then at the end of this case, during your final count, an E1C section is booked for placenta abruptio. So, how would you handle poor Billy Bob? What are some of the things you would think about or consider given his scenario? You're set up in the wrong room. He's coming as a positive risk assessment screen.
You just carry on and drop the contact. Would you not?
No, so because he is on the pathway during his routine isolation, or his isolation for being at the public health. So let's just picture it as, say, member two or miners rink for the last 2 weeks that everyone's been kind of on lockdown for. And because we are, again, right now currently a cluster, a community cluster, he would need a negative swab, which he doesn't have anyway, so we would treat him as presumptive. And even if he got a negative swab, because he is still within his 14-day isolation period, he's still a risk. So we would have to treat him as if he was a positive case or presumptive case. So in this scenario, we would have to move our setup. Call in the end, yeah, you could call in a second team for your C-section. That's no problem because at the end of this case, you're going to have a lot of stuff to take care of in terms of, you know, finishing the case, extubation, you know, doing your change in your shower. So for Billy Bob in this scenario, we'd have to go and reset up in room 9. So your roommate setup would be useless. You're gonna have to set up in your COVID dedicated OR theater. Right now, you're likely only going to have your 2, maybe your 3 people on, so your 2 7 to 3s and your 10 to 6. That's going to be your staff, so you're likely going to need to call in somebody else to help get this case going for you. The case itself is pretty uneventful. There's nothing different there. The patient seems stable. It's a booked as an E2, so likely can wait the 21 minutes after intubation. And just a reminder, the intubation process of the neck protection, that was a question that I got today. Is that still required? Yes, the neck protection is still a thing. If there's hood still around or a square drape, whatever you can get your hands on, it's still really important to protect your neck for any of that sprays or splashes that could happen during intubation. A reminder of the 50 seconds to wait after the muscle relaxant is given before they go ahead and actually do the intubation. That was something that slipped my mind kind of in between the waves. Alice, for the negative for the swab, we're just going to call it as it is for right now. Well, to be determined. When the OR decides to call in a second team, do they notify PACU just so that PACU can discuss if they need to do the same? That's a good point, Charlene. I'm not sure if that's a routine thing that is done. I can't comment either way, but hopefully that it'll be taken away today to make sure that it is done. But definitely that they would have to plan for another body, especially if it's 2 o'clock on a Sunday, you only have your 2 8 to 4s at that point. So yeah, the Billy Bob's, his intubations uneventful, goes as planned. Surgeon comes in after the 21 minutes through the ante room. And then I'm not sure where that popped up. Okay. And then goes ahead and scrubs, they can go through and if they're just passing through room 9 to go from the anteroom to the scrub sink, they don't need to don a gown to walk that short distance. They can just make sure they have their N95 mask on and their face shield and pass through to go to the scrub sink. Another question that came up when it was around the first wave about, does the whole team, like, so in this instance, would the surgeon need to wear an N95 mask where they're not in the room for the 21 minutes pre and could easily leave post? And the thought around that was that in case the airway is ever lost in the middle of surgery, it's probably safest for them to keep it on and wear the whole entire team to have one on. But who needs to wait in the holding area when we set up for the case? So that's a good question, Stella. If they need to wait in the holding area, because now that they've arrived, and now we found out their status has changed, I guess there's a couple options. So you could have one of the 3 people who are currently there stay with the patient. It's not ideal, but at the same time, they're already in that holding area spot, so they're there for 2 minutes or they're there for 25 minutes, it's not going to make that much of a difference. If it's possible for someone in recovery room, if they don't have any patients currently, if someone can just come around the corner to keep an eye on them for the time it was set up. Or I guess your third option would be you take them in the room, they're destined for room 9 anyways. If you have them in there while you're setting up and changing over and just kind of have someone stay with them. So I guess it'd just be the team's decision unless anyone else has any other ideas. There's no way Emerge is taking them back and it'd only be for a short amount of time while you set up the next room. And given the time frame, then you would, you'd have the availability to get MDR to bring up your next case card, but if it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, it might be a different story. Would you not just treat the COVID case as a regular flag in PACU, only extra staff in OR because need a runner? I think it would depend, Kendall, if they had other staff with patient in the recovery room area, and then they got the flag for the back room. And we just go ahead with the section and leave them wait since they're at E2. The kind of premise behind the story, Amy, is that the E1 isn't booked until the final count, so it's not while the patient's in the holding area. But if that was the case, then yes, obviously we could give this more time to get in other people to help with the COVID case as well. But yeah, kind of in this scenario, it's presented that it's at the end. Yeah, no worries. Any other questions or thoughts around this one? It's a pretty straightforward one, except for the fact that it's a surprise, which we're kind of used to having surprises arrive in the holding area of different flag statuses. The difference for this guy, even though he is asymptomatic, he's still currently in that 14-day isolation phase, so he's guilty until proven innocent. Any other thoughts or comments or questions around this scenario? Okay, I'm just kind of to talk about the extubation while we're kind of on the topic of just going through the little things that we might forget. The extubation part of it, so I know that there was a little bit of mix-up or confusion or non-compliance with one of the recent cases, not in the last week, but a little bit before that, and just like patient being extubated before anyone was even aware. Hopefully that, the pre-huddle, you can address that and say, just, at the end, we need to make sure that everyone is ready for the extubation because it means something a lot different on that kind of patient versus an everyday patient. And, we want everyone to remain as safe as possible. So, we had the plastic kind of drape over the second mask and the second filter ready to go, so that as soon as that tube was pulled out, we could immediately place the new one right over the patient's mouth, and the plastic cover would cover their face in case they coughed or had any sort of reaction waking up. And then we would hook them back up and give them some oxygenation, and we would wait those 21 minutes for air exchange to happen, and recognizing that in a pinch, 14 minutes gives us 99% of a full room air exchange, and 99.9% happens at that 21-minute mark. The other thing, so after the time has passed, ideally what happens then is we make communication with PACU and say that, we're just about finished our time in the area, in the OR theater, so they can don their PPE and prepare what they need to do. And then handoff will happen at the entranceway to room 9, so that we don't have to doff and redon PPE to travel down the hallway when they have to don PPE anyways. And then, so a report would be exchanged, handoff will be given, the patient will go down the hallway with them to their back room, and then we're going to use the buddy system. We're not going to call anyone specific a PPE assist because we're all competent in donning and doffing PPE, and all the other floors are utilizing a PPE buddy system, it's called. So basically everybody watches out for each other. If you're ready to doff, you wait until somebody else has eyes on you to doff, and to make sure that you're not contaminating yourself in any way. So the chat box is just kind of saying that Cameron's saying that they do need a runner and PACU, but if there's any issues with him, that's immediately 2 nurses in PPE, which is all of the Sunday staff, right? You guys definitely need extra staff. Alyssa saying Cameron's right. If you got tied up in the isolation room and there's another patient in PACU, they would be alone with no nurse. So yeah, they definitely require additional staff if there's a flag in that back room, because it is so isolated to begin with. And Cameron says if it's a COVID case in PACU with an additional patient on a Sunday with 2 staff, that's super tight. That's definitely a bad scenario. So yeah, I definitely think it's worth a conversation with Rob to start talking about those backup, like the ORs doing 7 to 7, 7 to 7 backup call. So 2 people per shift every day. So that's something you can maybe bring to Rob if anyone's looking for an extra few bucks standby pay. That's the way to do it. Any questions related to those things, and donning, doffing, PPE, buddy system, intubation, extubation, kind of covering a wide reach amongst all those, amongst these different scenarios. I'm going to flip to the next one because I think there's a few things that'll generate from this one as well. So a little bit of a shifting gears from the end of that last scenario. So you're just finishing an appendectomy for a COVID pathway patient. During closing, an E1 section is booked. Appendectomy patient is stable, and the anesthetist and surgeon have planned for extubation and transfer in PACU. So we have our COVID positive patient in room 9, just finishing an uneventful appendectomy, planning to extubate and then pass off down to PACU. The labor room calls to say that a patient is on a 14-day isolation because the husband recently returned home from Alberta. Mom has an epidural, and the anesthetist chooses to try a top-up. Upon beginning, it's evident that the top-up failed. The surgery is stopped until general anesthetic is administered. Baby is delivered. They are non-responsive. The labor room team decides that the baby needs to be intubated and transferred over to NICU. The mom's stable. She ends up being extubated in the OR and transferred to PACU. Everything else kind of goes uneventful. So what are the other things that, I don't know if you're getting paid, you'll have to ask your manager. What are some of the things that pop up different in this scenario from the ones that we've talked about previously?
They had to intubate the baby.
You have to intubate the baby, yep. What room are we doing this section in?
Not a COVID room.
Not a COVID room, exactly, because we're currently in the COVID room. We'd have to use 10, exactly, Amy. So it's not ideal, obviously, but in this scenario, we have to think life and death over a small chance of aerosolized particles kind of escaping under the doorway is kind of where the difference is. So everyone's obviously going to be in their N95 masks, and we're going to do the best that we can in room 10. Um, we would flannel the doors, make sure everybody is in there for the start of the case. The intubation is unexpected, obviously, so depending on the time when that happens is going to depend on if the labor room and NICU team can get out with the baby before mom is intubated. It likely is not going to happen. Again, this goes back to, this is where the 14 minutes kind of might come into play. So if mom comes in, feels everything right from the beginning, we know it happens all the time. Has to put her asleep. Baby's delivered and then comes out unresponsive. They work on the baby for a little bit. They're doing their thing, and then it comes decided that they're destined for the NICU. And I've been told that when they leave with the baby, it's usually because they want to get to where they feel most comfortable. So they want to get to NICU, they want to get to where all their supplies are and resources are. Do they have to? No. They can do what they need to do in the OR10. So we've had conversations with them to say that if they can wait the 14 minutes after intubation and then exit with the incubator and the baby and the team, that would be the best case scenario. Can we tape the doors from the inside quickly until they have to leave? We can tape them from the outside as well, because in this scenario especially, we have those extra people already on deck. So we can tape them absolutely from the inside or the outside. It doesn't matter. Whatever we have time to do will all help benefit, help do the best that we can in the scenario that we're given. Like I said, it's not ideal, but it's it's a possibility, especially when we think about how we are a community cluster right now, and gene expert tests are taking a little bit longer to come back. When mom comes in labor, if they are in true active labor and baby's in fetal distress, which I think was similar to the scenario on the weekend, then there is no time to wait. And maybe we're already doing a case in room 9 and this comes through the door. So I do think it is possible. So it's good to have the conversations to think about how can we best make room 10 work. After the mom is intubated and the people in the room, if we tape the doors so we can't go in or out, so how do you get more sponges or how do you get another suture, etc. If you can doff and re-don your PPE, you're clean, stay clean, you can open those cupboard doors and retrieve the items you need to get. Being very mindful that you need to have clean hands going in. So if you go ahead and touch something else that's patient related or contaminated or what have you, you need to be mindful of that and change again before you put your hands in. But in this scenario, it's going to look a little different than room 9, so we will be very mindful and careful of everything that we're doing inside that room. That also reminded me too about the bed. So that bed in particular will definitely have to be pushed out in the hallway. If we can strip the linens on it, and we need to make a phone call to housekeeping right away to let them know that it is a contact droplet dirty bed in the hallway. In relation to the other patients that happen in room 9, just remember that if you can strip the bed, wipe it down, and if the patient's going back on it, if they come from, say, inpatient 4D, they're going to stay on that bed anyway. So if we can strip it and change the laundry, strip it, wipe it, and change the laundry, that's perfect. But if it is a stretcher, if we can get it out before the door gets locked down, that's going to be great. And again, communicate with housekeeping that it's a dirty stretcher so they can clean it right away and it doesn't accidentally get put back into the mix with everything else.
Just wondering who has the chart and who's charting.
So the system that we use for the charting purposes is the delivering unit, so 4D, labor room, ER, brings the chart up in whatever way they usually do, whether it's a runner, whether they put it in a patient belonging bag. And we have a clean person that's our runner that stays outside of the theater who if we have to get dressings or staplers or anything out of the hallway, we can utilize either the walkie-talkie system, which we've proven to not be the greatest, or the phone system. We'll still work just to make sure that you specifically let housekeeping know that you've touched the landline in the room so that they know for sure to clean that and wipe that down. And again, being mindful of trying to touch those things with your clean hands when you do. And so for the purposes of what time they go to sleep, what time, whatever, it's just a communication thing between the runner and the circulator or one of the nurses that are in the room, that those things kind of get documented. The only record that stays in the room is the count sheet. Related to pregnant people, two things that also kind of came up today that you may see in the near future is that, so I don't know if many people or anybody heard, there was a confirmed asymptomatic positive 38, probably 39-week now pregnant woman in our community. She has since tested negative. She's been cleared by public health to no longer be infected, but until she's cleared from an occupational health standpoint, we still have to treat her as a COVID positive patient. So I'm not sure when the occupational part will be cleared. I just got word today from Jessica that she was, consider it resolved from a public health perspective, but that woman is in the community still, and not officially cleared from our perspective, but is no longer asymptomatic COVID positive. The other lady that we have wandering around our community is pregnant with triplets. And so I'm not sure if this got any further resolved today. Rebecca, Brad, and I were chatting. Room 9 is not equipped, or it might not be right as of now, to accommodate 3 baby warmers. So she is booked for an elective section. Obviously, we're doing this in a controlled environment. She is not COVID positive. But if she was to come in active labor tonight and then it required an immediate C-section, she likely would not get cleared of being COVID negative by the time by the time we brought her to the OR. So as of right now, tonight, I believe, and Rebecca can tell me if anything happened since we last chatted, that she would have to be done in room 10 because that's the only room that has the appropriate hookups for 3 warmers, and we'd have to utilize the scenario we just talked about where room 10 would be used to the best of our ability to make this happen. There is in our mind, and what we can see, it is a possibility to make room 10 accommodate 3 warmers, but we need like a splitter for the suction and the medical air, and then the third warmer runs off a generator or some fancy thing. So it's coming, and we hope that it doesn't end up like that, like having to deal with it because she is booked for an elective C-section and she'll have her proper 72-hour before swab to hopefully clear her of COVID and everything. But in the off chance over the next few days or whenever, I just wanted to give you guys that heads up that that possibility may exist, and we'd have to treat her like COVID if her swab wasn't back in time. Any questions or thoughts or anything on pregnant people and COVID in room 10 and room 9? I'll move to the last scenario, and then there's just a few other things I wanted to talk about. So Barbie Doll is a 9-year-old girl who is on post-op day 8 for a tonsillectomy. She presents to emerge producing plus frank red blood from her mouth. ENT was consulted, and they booked her for an E1 post-op tonsil bleed. It's 4 o'clock Sunday morning, and the OR team is, of course, at home. There's no time for a rapid swab, and she does well during the surgery. She's extubated post-operatively and then again transferred over to PACU. Any thoughts on this scenario? What sticks out that's different about it? So basically, because of the type of surgery that she's had already, she did have a swab at one point, but because she's on post-op day 8, she had the swab anywhere between 8 to 11 days ago, so it's no longer valid. There is no time for that repeat swab, so again, even if we weren't in a community cluster, because of the type of surgery that she's having, she would have to be treated as a COVID presumptive case coming to the OR. And again, this is another thing where, um, from an OR perspective, this is done in airborne PP. That's correct, Cameron. Yeah, anybody, when I say treat it like COVID, yeah, that's what I mean, is an airborne PPE for the case. And again, this is another one where it's an awkward time in the morning, so it's helpful to have that call out team, those backup people, and to have recovery room really look into a call out list as well, or a backup list. Make all rooms ready for COVID. Yeah, I know what you mean. Even, I don't know, we'll see what numbers look like and how much we get into it maybe over the next week, but even maybe a easily collapsible second room that could convert. I'm not sure, but a thought anyways. But basically, with this scenario, mostly what I was trying to get at was that, based on the type of surgery that she's having, and even because that she had a swab prior to her original surgery, it's no longer valid for this admission. Any thoughts related to this one? So overall, we'll just move to the debrief and discussion. Was there any strengths or areas of improvement that we haven't already discussed that we could bring forth tomorrow or the next week to Brad or Rob or Alicia or whoever, besides Packy wants to get a little bit of a call list for backup help? Um, Maybe one of the things tomorrow, when there's a little bit of extra staff, where there's no trauma block, they can start gathering some things to have like an emergency bucket for room 10 to easily convert it to a PPE room, or sorry, a COVID room, and if such the case was to present itself. Some tape and flannels or something all ready to go. One of the other things that we had discussions about today was around the gas machine. And for COVID positive or presumptive cases, it is still our responsibility to clean the gas machine and the little wheelie anesthetic cart. So just be mindful of that, to doff, redon, get your clean gear on. The supplies are all in that bottom drawer of the anesthetic wheelie cart, and make sure you give that gas machine a good wipe down. X-ray also reached out today because where I said there was a case this evening, they required X-ray. Um, they are going to they're going to decide amongst themselves what to do, but I think probably best practice for them would be obviously leave their equipment in the room and then hang around the OR, maybe go change their scrubs or whatever in the meantime, and then come back in when housekeeping comes in to wipe down their own equipment. I'm thinking that that would probably be the best practice because they are most trained in what goes on wash and wear on those machines, and then have them take it out of the room then. I did send in the memo to Diana also just to say, like, depending on the type of emergency, which we will communicate to them, if they will be required to stay in the room once they bring the equipment, or if there is time for them to exit, and then we'll stay within the department, obviously, and then when the 21 minutes have passed, we'll call them back in, as we want to limit the amount of people present for intubation as much as we can. Rebecca's going to touch base with labor room tomorrow. Plug outlet is good for the other warmer, and maybe get the split ready. So hopefully we'll be able to convert room 9 to have it ready to accommodate those 3 warmers if the situation was to present itself with that triplet mum. And maybe, Rebecca, if you could have the free people or the extra people tomorrow prepare that stuff if we ever had to use room 10, if it's in a bucket or container or something, and maybe just kept it outside on one of the emergency C-section backup carts or something. The last thing I had on my list, no, sorry, I lied. I have 2 things. One was donning and doffing. Donning, I'm not concerned about. You can't basically don incorrectly. It doesn't matter really what order you put it in. There is a quote-unquote IPAC proper way, but as long as you have clean hands before you start, there's no real wrong way to put your PPE on. It's when you're doffing that's super important. And like I said, in the first wave, we call people PPE assists, and that was their job and whatever. But since then, the conversation has moved to calling it a buddy system. So everybody's looking out for each other. And it's really important that if I'm going to doff, I'm going to say, hey, Rebecca, can you just like lay eyes on me while I doff to make sure I don't contaminate myself? Or, she stops me and calls me out if I'm about to put my dirty hands above my neck. And that's really the most important thing that I've been stressing to anybody I've taught PPE donning and doffing over the past, I don't know, decade, is that whenever your hands go up over your shoulders, you need to have clean hands. So Eileen from IPAC calls it the high real estate area. So you want to make sure that anytime they go above your shoulder, you have just freshly sanitized, however many times that it takes to ensure that when you're taking off your shield, your mask, your head garb, whatever it is, that it's clean hands always going above your shoulders. Yes, mention of showering. So it's not mandatory, but we have been given recommendation that it's advisable to change your scrubs and shower after being part of a COVID case, like in the intubation kind of part of it. Contact Droplet if you guys feel like you would feel more comfortable showering as well. There is one stall in the female and male locker rooms that are cleared out for showering purposes. So you feel free to utilize them if you need to do that. Like I said, it's a recommendation, but it's not a mandatory thing. But I think most people do feel comfortable doing that afterwards. And the last thing I just wanted to make mention of, I'm not sure where you guys in PAC you keep your N95 masks, but for us, we do keep them still in Rebecca's office. So if you're looking for them on the weekend or evening, that is where we keep them. I don't know if we're at the point where it's safe to keep them in the case carts with all the other PPE yet. I'm not quite sure if it's going to happen like the last time and word got out and we went missing half our stock. So until now, they're there. And so if you need one, you can always grab one. Did anyone else have any final thoughts or questions or comments? I kept you a little bit over an hour. I'm sorry. I know it's Thursday night. Nobody wants to be talking about PPE and stuff. I did talk about the gas machine. Did you have more stuff to add, Rebecca? I did say that it's our responsibility. Start paying attention, would you?
Can I ask a question?
I'd like,
Okay, Andrew. Yeah, Andrew, you go first, and then Phyllis.
I was just wondering, like, so the ones I've done, like the anesthetist touches the patient and then touches the gas machine, touches the cart or whatever like that.
Mm-hmm.
So is everything to be thrown out that they touch after they touch the patient?
Yes. If that's we would hope that they have gathered what they wanted for sure, and even some of the maybes beforehand, and made like a small pile so that everything didn't have to be thrown out. And that trolley that goes in there is streamlined, so it's not like full. But yeah, ideally they make a small pile, and if the small pile has to be sacrificed in the end, so be it. But we hopefully don't have to clear everything out. But yeah, if they touch the patient and then they don't change their gloves, and then they go and touch every single item in that gas machine, or in the gas machine and in the trolley cart, then unfortunately that's destined for the garbage. You can't trust them, you're right. Are anesthesia continuing education with COVID, or just wing it like usual? Just winging it like usual.
I just want to thank you for all you're doing. It's good for preparation, and thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Just trying, and my farewell gift to all of you. But yeah, anytime you have questions, until it's not my job anymore, I will try my best to answer them and help any way I can. I know it's super stressful, and I know everybody is sick of friggin' hearing about COVID, but we're still living it. Unfortunately, this is going to be our toughest battle yet, I think. So we just have to stay on point and keep each other safe, and hopefully we get to the other side of it. And I don't know, I didn't ask you if you got time back for tonight. You'll definitely get education points. I took a picture of everybody that was here, so I will submit a sheet tomorrow with everybody's names, and I'll try to backtrack and find numbers and make best I can out of that, and submit that for everyone's education points. So if there's any other questions or
Can I ask you
final,
one more thing?
yes, you can.
So say like it's up to us to tell anesthesia what the hell they're doing because they don't understand
Clean and
like the
dirty.
transmission of the disease, it
Yeah.
seems, or what contact or what droplet or what any of that is.
Yeah.
So if they don't listen to us, what do we do? Like, do we just throw everything out? Do we confront them? Because it's every single time they just don't seem to get that you can't touch the patient and then go and touch other things and then go back and touch this and then take your phone out and then go out into the, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just,
I
it's
know.
constant.
I know some are more of a challenge than others to get that through. In the moment, I think you just have to judge by who it is and if you would even be wasting your breath to mention things. As for like escalating it and taking it anywhere else beyond throwing everything out, unfortunately, I guess maybe like Alicia or like Brad, but mostly Alicia, would be the best route if possible. I don't know from an occupational health standpoint if they would intervene, but at that point, I feel like you'd have to likely put pen to paper and name things to get anywhere. But yeah,
Okay. Because like, or in the first wave or whatever, we have an incident where we touched, like someone did an intubation, then touched things in the crash cart, and then it came out that the case was COVID positive.
right, yep.
And so they told us not to throw out any of that stuff, that it was okay, and that the only way you could catch it is if someone licked the phone and then you licked the phone after them. So I'm like, I feel like a lot of us are confused about what, if it can be transmitted on objects. Like it feels like we don't have anything behind what we're saying to them because they'll just do it anyway and then we're like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, no one's on the same page. I get my direction would be to toss it. Like, and especially this wave where we see how highly transmissible these variants are. I don't know the research behind what surfaces it can and can't live on. I would weigh on the side of caution because what it is, I'm not going to lick the package, but what I might do is touch the package and then we go down to the lounge and I have my snack and I don't do proper hand hygiene and then I'm licking my fingers. Like that's how the scenario, you're not going to lick a box obviously, but that's other scenario is very real of how transmission could happen. I get the whole entire crash cart. It's an expensive thing to toss, but I mean, I think if nothing was thrown out after that case, I think I would call ourselves lucky that it wasn't passed on to anybody else. But yeah, I don't have any authority, I guess, to make the definitive call, but my recommendation would absolutely be if that they were touched, if anything was touched with dirty hands that have touched a positive patient, then I would for sure throw it out because I wouldn't take any chances.
So it can be transmitted on substance, like on material.
I don't know. I honestly, I haven't researched or looked enough to know that it can or can't. But obviously, I can't imagine that everybody's getting it transmitted by kissing. Like I feel like door handles and things like that are playing a part, but I have not looked into the research, so I can't say for sure.
Because I thought it was like through breathing and like coughing and stuff like
Droplet.
that.
But like if you pick up a droplet or something from the patient and then transfer it over to this intermediate item, that's where I think you would
So
get
it can be, it can go on like things. You know what I mean? Like it's like this gray area, but it's like the most important thing because they're doing these things, and then you're like, I don't even know if I can tell them that they're doing something wrong because I don't know
definitively that it's not.
if I don't know.
I know what you mean. Like I know that I agree it's gray, and I don't have a definitive answer. I don't know enough about it to say if I touch Andrew, who's COVID positive, and then I touch the door handle, and then Kendall comes behind me and touches the door handle and then licks her hands 2 minutes later, will she have a higher risk of getting that transmitted? I don't know if it stayed on that door handle or not, or will it stay on that box of epi or not. I don't know for sure, but my thought would be in to be safe that I would just toss it. I wouldn't take any chances that it would or wouldn't. So
Then we should be like 100% be changing our scrubs and
oh,
doing those things.
well,
That shouldn't be like an option. It should be mandatory.
it was presented as an
No, no.
option, as a recommendation, not as a mandatory thing. Jordan commented that in the research from the first wave that it was up to 72 hours on certain materials, it would say. Somebody said cost is not a thing with COVID when it comes to safety. That's always first. Can PACU speak to that? I feel like they have a separate thing for crash cars. So like a different little trolley, which I think we did utilize. I think I seen Rebecca say that we made like a mini crash cart for code blue drugs for COVID. Yeah, and just take the monitor in. They say it can survive on a number of hours, like Jordan said, but it is so gray. Cameron commented. And Confection Control cleared those drugs and said they were fine to use, Andrew? Question mark. So I guess it must have went through IPAC to say this was the scenario when they said it was okay.
We found out that they were positive while we were doing, like there was a little bit of a list on the weekend, and Sean called Kathy Lynn in freaking out because we were stopping, because we were trying to figure out what was going on, like if we were going to infect every other patient that we did.
Right.
And they said there's no way it can be transferred on surfaces. You are 100% safe. You can go home, kiss your baby. There's no way you can get it from surfaces.
IPAC said that.
Kathy Lynn said it. I don't know who she must have contacted them. I'm sure she just wouldn't come up with that.
That's something we can take away and we can see if we can find more. But in the interim, I don't know. I would throw it out. If it was me, I'd throw it out. And I would say, or if they didn't agree with me, I'd let them know. And if they didn't agree with me, I'd throw it out anyways. Jordan said,
so like not the throwing out. It's that we were touched and then we're touching them again. You know what I mean? And then we're
Yeah.
going to be just like get someone sick. I don't care about the cost of anything. Like
like someone uses their phone at their dirty gloves, then the next case they also haul it out and use their phone with the next patient who's not COVID, and
they don't wash their hands before they do a spinal, and then they put COVID all over a new baby. You know what I mean? Like it's just.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Whatever.
And it's their own entity, and they do what they want whenever they want. So it's hard to do. Yeah, it's so frustrating. We can do our best, but our best is limited by the people who are weakest link, and those are often our weakest link. But aside from doing the best that you can, and knowing that you're doing everything that you can to provide the best care, I guess that's the best we can do right now. But I will try to find out some more information about living on surfaces and where that stands, and I'll reach out to our IPAC person and just see what their perspective is on, touching boxed items or personal items with dirty gloves, and where the sit time is, or transferability is for this wave. Yeah, the more information discussion, the better. Like it's questions that someone might not have thought of, or in the moment they were like, oh, I don't know the answer to that, and didn't think to ask or whatever. So it's all good. A special COVID pack of drugs for Code Blue, and does everyone know where this is? I believe that there was a mini version of Code Blue drugs, like a mini crash cart. Wait to see if Rebecca responds. She would know more about that than me. It's on the cart in room 9 there. Tanya Townsend said it's in the room on the little wheelie anesthetic cart. Check. Even all the open airways in the drawers of the machine. maybe that's something we can clear out and just leave a one of each of those mask sizes and oral airways. I mentioned to Rebecca this morning, maybe in the morning, while we are a little bit slower in services, 2 people can be assigned every morning after ECGs to go in room 9, make sure it's set up, make sure the supplies are in there, that everything's clean and it's minimized and things like that. Um, so it's someone's responsibility every day to kind of make that set up, because you're only going to help your partner, and the next day maybe that person has helped you to be prepared for the case that you're coming blown in the doors for. Andrew, I'm not sure if you could see, but Jordan shared a CDC link there that has some info. And so if we need the paddles, we need to take it separately, take them with the monitor. And while I have a captive audience, the Zoll defibrillator rollout has been postponed, which if you haven't figured out yet, that is going to not happen until September, I think it is. So we're stuck with our current archaic models until those new ones roll in. Any other thoughts or questions? One other thing I was going to do was I was going to post the link to that daily screener in here, so if anybody wants to click on it, and then they can save it to their favorites in their phone so that they're able to easily access it each day before their shift or the night before or whatever. So you should be able to just click on that link from the chat box and it'll open up the separate page for you to be able to fill it out. And if you do have a Nova Scotia... No, go ahead.
Sorry, just one little item to add.
Yep.
As staff, we're getting sometimes they're hanging still a mask off their ear, and that has to stop, except for lunch.
Yeah, the complacency with masking and visors. Yeah, the visors were put in place to not only protect us from patients and those we encounter, in the hallways and whatever, but it's also between staff, because that's pretty much usually when we let our guards down. And I noticed, and I was part of the problem today on lunch break. There was over the 8 people in our nursing lounge on break, and I think that is something we need to be a little bit more mindful of, because this variant does transmit very easily in those kind of scenarios, close contact, no masks, people with their hands to their mouth, that kind of scenario. So maybe something just to be a little bit more mindful of. It's super easy, Dolores. She'll be able to figure it out. You got on here tonight, so I have faith. Any other questions or thoughts? Any word on doing the 12-hour team shifts? Haven't heard anything. Still full steam ahead basically with surgery, so I don't imagine so at this time, Amy. Oh, is Mike still struggling? Mike Gillis, is that who you're talking about, Cameron? What a sin. Good thing I recorded it. I can't believe it. I thought for sure one of the kids would have helped you, Dolores. You're so tech savvy now. All right, if that's everything, like I said, I did record the session, so I'm going to save it to my desktop here, and I'm going to try and figure out how I put it on a stick and put it on the computers around work. Not tomorrow, because I am taking tomorrow off, but on not Monday neither, because I'm going to the PACU again, but Tuesday, I will do it on Tuesday. All right, you're welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming and spending your Thursday evening with me. See yas. No problem.